So welcome to the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast, Conrad. It's good to have you here. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for turning up. So your name popped up to me in a couple of different places. So I can't remember what was first. I've got, listeners won't see this because I don't record video, but we've got Miniature Wargames magazine here, issue 475. And we've also got the star of, is it Aladori or Alador? I've never heard it said.
I've never heard Joe pronounce it myself, but I would say Alador.
Do what we want,
But I mean, given how reticent he is about giving a canonical interpretation of basically anything, I think you could probably do it either way, and he won't gainsay it.
So yeah, you wrote a scenario for Rangers of Shadow Deep, which is something that has attracted me for a while to try, but I've just that's why I wanted to. I mean, this looks really good, and I wanted to talk to you about how you basically did it. And we've also got, I mentioned the Miniature Wargames magazine, which I've been talking about a lot on the show recently, and this really cool article that you did about basically playing war games with your twins, who I believe are 5. Is that right?
6 now. 6 now.
But 5 time of writing, I guess. This is
but 5 time writing. My daughter would correct you. She is a sophisticated older lady of 6 now.
Yeah, but that's when you start getting sold alcohol in Scotland. So you've got to be clear on these things.
I thought they sold. I thought you got it in schools.
Yeah, that replaced the milk.
Very good, very good.
So this article is brilliant. I mean, again, I talk now and then on the podcast. So I've got a daughter who's 18 months now. She's obviously not quite at the stage where we're getting Warhammer Fantasy Battles out on the table, but I thoroughly enjoyed this article that you put together, Conrad. Wargaming with 5-year-olds, and we've got sort of illustrations about what you've done. You talked us through, what kind of games you were playing and the wee rules that came up and stuff like that. So was this something that, what was the genesis of this sort of coming about, both in playing it and writing about it?
Well, there's, to answer your second question first, writing about it, well, I'm a columnist for Miniature Wargames, and frankly, in that field, I'm just a bit of a tart, really, in that if I'll write about, basically I have to produce about 2,000 words a month, 2 to 2,500, and I write about what it is I'm doing in gaming. Now, I try to stay away from what I call games with my mates, which is, we ran this game, it was awesome, here's a bunch of pictures. And I try and sort of focus and look at what will the person, the chap at home who, comes home from hard day's work, Miniature Wargames has landed on the mat. What can you do with this article? Now, I am acutely aware that Wargames magazines are far more read than played. So my criteria for a good article are that, firstly, it must be entertaining to read, because many more people, and experience is a bitter teacher in this case, many more people will read it than play it. But that there must be something there for the people who actually want to apply what you've talked about. So firstly, I needed something to write about. That was what I was doing at the moment. That was what I wrote about. And I will continue doing that for Miniature Wargames until they stop asking me or I find it boring. And that's the second part of your question. The first part, how did it start? 2 things. I mean, my kids have grown up with Wargames because I've always been pottering away in the corner painting toy soldiers, or they know that daddy's friends come over sometimes and we play games together. And, it became this thing that would, what is this? And I want to know what this is. And I think it sort of came to a head during my family's second bout of COVID, where we were all locked in together. And I was trying to find literally anything for the kids to do that didn't involve them sitting in front of a screen. And they didn't have a huge amount of energy, so I couldn't take them out the back garden and run them around. I couldn't. I could have lumped them in front of a telly, but we were doing that already. So I had a game called Red Alert by Richard Borg, which is in the Command and Color series, which is a spaceship game. And I'm ashamed to say I've never actually played Red Alert straight, but I'd opened it up and had a look at it when the Kickstarter arrived. And I think COVID probably had a certain amount to do with that. But I knew I had a mat, this sort of fleece spaceship space mat, and I had a bunch of these little green and red plastic spaceships. And the kids are very interested in space. So, we've learned songs about the solar system and, sort of how far away is the moon and questions like that. So they're interested in space. So I laid this out on the kitchen table. I put the mat down and I said, right, here are some plastic tokens that we had from another game. And you can flick them like sort of tiddlywink type jobs across the board. I'm going to take the red spaceships. You two are going to take the green spaceships. And we're going to flick you can move. There's a hex pattern on the mat. You can move each spaceship 2 spaces, and you can shoot 3 shots from any spaceship that you want. So you have 3 shots total. And I think they were about 2.5, maybe 3. No, I'm not. Sorry, 4. They would have been 4 when we did this. And they grasped it pretty quickly. And so long as you kept it short and you cut your cloth to fit your measure, I mean, pulling out Advanced Squad Leader was never on the cards, but they could grasp, I know what this is. I know it's a spaceship. It looks like a spaceship. That's it. And we would happily pull that out, play a game, and put it away. And that would be 20 minutes well spent. And, there was, at the risk of sounding frightfully, middle class about the whole thing, they learned some turn taking. They learned counting. They had to sort of work out what was the best way to flick their tokens across the thing to hit the spaceship. And because I generally play 2-on-1, they learned a little bit of teamwork, which they have been happily ganging up on me ever since, both in games and in life. But so that's where it started, and then everything else sort of grew from that.
Yeah, so in the sort of piece that you cover in the article, I mean, you've got some great photos that you've taken here. We've got a hex-based board, and it was the little sort of red coat toys that you were using, wasn't it, for this one? So,
yeah.
Do you think that's I know with these articles you're not dictating to the reader what they should do. You're providing suggestions, aren't you? And when you talk about using these toys, do you think that's appealing because these are maybe things that the kids are playing with already? They're already quite familiar with them, or?
Yes. Oh no. I mean, you have to sort of bring it to them, and sort of find something, because I knew that if I gave them a bunch of my 20mm tanks, my 20mm tanks would not be long for this world. So that was a factor. So I used things that they already played with and that they already had some experience with. The Playmobil toys were actually a gift from a very kind friend of mine who'd been trying to play Little Wars with them with his own kids, and they hadn't really taken to it. And he was moving house, and I think he just wanted to move them on. So that was something that was that sort of fell into my lap there. But ultimately, you don't need that much stuff. I mean, give a kid a stick, he'll play a game with it. It's not, my daughter will turn, you give her a box and a piece of fabric, and by the God that made me, 30 seconds later, a tea party will have been organized. It's, you find the things that interest them and you sort of pull it into that. I mean, the only thing that I bought for the first game was that I noticed that I had a collection of Playmobil figures which had virtually no female figures in them. And I reckoned that my daughter would probably lose interest if there wasn't something for her to do, and in that respect. So I went to looked on our local adverts website, and various people were flogging Playmobil or Duplo or whatever. And, I put a few bids in, picked up a couple of princesses for a tenner, and went, excellent, we're away to the races. So far as she was concerned, the game was, making sure the princess got away safe, and that, she could order these little guys around. And so far as my son was concerned, there was a certain amount of messing around with the redcoats, but the main thrust of the game, so far as he was concerned, was shooting the toy cannon. And that was one of our first, and we've played that sort of thing a couple of times. And if you give them the material, they will make it their own. I mean, I think I mentioned in the article when we started off that I had this whole idea that we were going to, I had a toy wagon, and they were going to escort the wagon across the board, and or something similar. And in between me, I don't know, running upstairs to get something or answer a question for my wife or whatever, the kids had already taken a look at the board, gone, yeah, that's boring. And Tilly had discovered that, oh yeah, there's princesses here. So she'd gone and she'd found another princess figure, and well, there's two princesses, and they're both in this house, and the bad guys are coming to kidnap them. And I went, fine, of course. Of course, that's what this game is about. And we ran with that. So, yeah, I mean, if they show, because I mean, I don't know if you've any, I've a little experience of trying to sort of give talks to teenagers or younger kids, and getting that initial icebreaker is the hard bit. If you can get them to buy in at all, you can keep that momentum going. So, I mean, I would say find whatever is lying around. If your kid likes dinosaurs, go with a game about dinosaurs. If she likes princesses, make a game about princesses. That's the thing. And keep, YouTube is an absolute gold mine of, if you want to, I Googled, just had a look on YouTube and had a look at some board game reviews, and people were talking about, oh, well, this simple kids game uses these mechanics. And I went, excellent, steal those, go. And everything else was just a few index cards and a black marker.
Yeah, I mean, I like the sort of, the ethos that you were talking about here was, like you're just saying there, kind of meeting them on their own terms, and being able to adapt as well to, if they've, like you've explained there, if they change direction with something, you go with it rather than trying to fight against it. And just, I mean, the kids' attention spans are so short, aren't they? So were you aware any time that attention was starting to drift, and you could then step in and try and pull them back in, sort of thing?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had I had the baddies sort of played to the extent that I wanted them to play. Like, I've gotten very good at shooting the toy cannon so that it knocks down one soldier, which gives them enough of a fright that they go, oh God, the baddies are coming. We have to do something about this. But not so much the, oh God, he's just taken out 4 of our guys. We can't win. Let's give up and run away. For example, the second game, which was sort of kind of more a board game kind of thing than, let's say, a war game, was I had a toy dragon. And I had a toy dragon because I think my sister-in-law had given them this bubble bath, and it came in a bottle shaped like a dragon. So I took the knob off the front. Excellent. Dragon monster. Perfect. So he would get up and roar and blow smoke and, do things while they were running around trying to collect all the sort of the three things that they had to collect to defeat him. So, I would say that if you are putting a game like this together, and particularly for young kids, like I'll play more structured games with the kids. Like we play Ticket to Ride, and we play Labyrinth, and we play Junior Carcassonne, and a couple of other board games like that, and Ludo, because my mother apparently hates me and gave them a Ludo set for Christmas. And my God, I'd forgotten how much I despise that game. So I always play those straight because they're a sealed system and you don't want them to but with toy soldiers or toy dragons or, bubble bath monsters, I'm perfectly willing to cheat like Billy-O on the games master / opponent side to just give them an exciting time, because that's all I want. I want them to play this and have fun and and have good memories of that. And just particularly at a time when we couldn't leave the house very much, that this was something real that you could hold.
Yeah. Aye. No, I mean, you when you've done something like that, I mean, particularly with your own kids, I'd imagine there'll be a rewarding feeling after it. Whereas you compare that to, we've just sat on the computer for 2 hours. You don't come away from that thinking, you know what, that was great. I really loved being on the computer for 2 hours.
Yeah.
At least that's certainly not the way I look at it. So one of the things I really enjoyed, I was rereading your article last night. You had a wee bit just joking about like rules lawyers. So I believe it was your daughter had been told that you could deploy the spaceships anywhere on the table, and I think she'd went underneath the table. One of the table supports and put the spaceships there, so they were basically couldn't be hit, because that was in the rules.
Yeah, I'm raising a tiny lawyer. It seems, she's there's a barrister in there. God help us all. I mean, hopefully not. There's special schools. There's still hope for her, but she may. But yeah, the rules lawyering has been. But that's kids. I mean, I told my son that he couldn't shoot his crossbow in the kitchen because my wife has these plates hung on the walls. People talk about the dangers of exposing your children to violent media. I read my son the Ladybird book of William Tell, and my father-in-law produced this toy crossbow a couple of months later, and yeah, the
is it one with like the red sticky thing on it, the sucker?
Yeah. I told him no shooting that in the kitchen, right? So there I was making breakfast. 40-something fat dad in his dressing gown, sort of trying to get porridge and cereal and stuff together in the kitchen, and suddenly this arrow whizzes past my ear, and I turn around and go, "Bear!" He goes, "What?" I went, "No shooting this in the kitchen." And Ted, he's just standing there in the hall, going, "I'm not in the kitchen."
I shot into the kitchen, but I wasn't in there.
Clearly, but that's that's kids for you. But yeah, she had worked out how to game that, and we said, okay, well, no, they have to be on top of the table, on top of the mat. Can I put them on the table but underneath the mat? No.
I know it's great stuff. It's one of my favourite articles that I've read in the magazine since I've been subscribed to it. And you're saying that, I mean, I've seen your name in bits and pieces of other stuff. So you're writing every edition for the magazine. Yeah. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah. I that started off purely because I used to write for Battle Games Actually, no. Actually, it was a fellow Scot who gave a countryman of yours who gave me. He used to run a magazine called the Classic Wargaming Journal or the Classic Wargamers Journal, and it was this little photocopied thing. It was lovely. It was all heart. There was anyone who was involved in this was for the love, and I used to write this sort of odd color piece for them, like. Sort of silly stories about wargaming and it was just sort of 500 words on, a friend of mine who's had a horrible prank played on him, which was he is profoundly colorblind. And some of the lads at a house party went up to his room and switched around some of the labels on his paint pots, with the result that he produced this gene stealer army. And they were in... I have no idea how his vision works, but he had thought he painted these guys in red and blue and purples, and they came out in this sort of mustard and yellow, and they looked like traffic wardens. And after about 2 weeks at the club, someone had to tell him, and apparently that person was me, so I just sort of pushed out to the front. It was like, Conrad, you tell him. And he did not take that well at all. So I ended up writing like little stories like that. Like, for example, I was in work one day and I was reading, I think it was Wargames Illustrated or something like that. And one of my colleagues sort of leaned over, had a look and went, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, I play games with toy soldiers, every so often pretend to be Napoleon." And the guy sort of looked at me over his glasses and went, "Oh, yeah, okay. Well, at weekends, I dress up as a lady, So I hadn't quite realized that these were apparently on the same level of disclosure. So I was banging out little pieces like that. And then I sent Henry something for battle games. And then I sent him another thing because he liked one and he said, "Can I have another?" So I think, actually, no, someone had let him down and he went, "I know you do a bit of writing. Would you be able to produce something?" And I did, and he liked it. And one thing came to another. And then eventually it was, "Would you like to do a column?" And that sort of grown. It used to be sort of 1,000 words on whatever is exercising you at the moment. And I always tried to make it sort of vaguely applicable, sort of, here's some stuff that I, if I could have a time traveling machine and give my teenage self some wargaming advice, this is what that advice would be. Or here is, if you want to use armies across periods, here are some things you could do where you could get maybe more game for your figures, so to speak. So, if you've got red-coated British for the Napoleonic period, you can bring those guys forward almost to the 1840s and back a bit, that sort of thing. And then I got asked to write a few more scenarios, and now I mostly do a mixture of scenarios. I try to keep the think pieces to about 1 in 3 because, everyone has an opinion and mine is no more well-informed than anybody else's. So the odd interview. I mean, one of the I did an interview recently with a fella called Mark Fastoso because my wife had given me a couple of his scenario books for Christmas, and I'd read them and just went, "These are cracking." I sort of sent him an email and just said, "Really enjoyed your work. Thank you very much. By the way, if you ever feel like doing an interview, I'd be delighted to talk to you because you've just written so many scenarios and they're so good. What's the secret sauce?" And I got talking to the chap, and he did an interview, and I was very pleased with it. But I asked him, "What do you do for a living?" And he went, "Oh, I work in," because I'd sort of done a bit of background reading on the guy, and so went, "Oh, you work in TV. How did you get started in that?" And he went, "Well, I ended up as an assistant on this thing. You probably haven't heard of it. Working for this guy called Ken Burns." that man started working on the American Civil War with the producer and director of that, Ken Burns, a guy who's since gone on to do Vietnam, A History of Jazz, like extraordinary stuff. And he just threw it off like it was nothing. I was flat. My gast was flabbered. And you meet these extraordinary people who do extraordinary things, and we're all sort of bound together by the sort of the Freemasonry of toy soldiers, which is a wonderful thing. I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have traveled or had people come visit me, and with, pretty much to a man, they've all proved to be, wonderful people. And, my wife occasionally refers to, one of your internet axe murderer friends is coming to stay. I sort of go, he collects Peninsular War British. Well, he can't be a bad man.
Aye, getting pulled over by the police and you've got drink on your breath, but it's somebody you've just had a game of Blood Bowl with, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of scenarios, then, Rangers of Shadow Deep, that one of your favourite games, given that you wrote a scenario for it, or?
I've written a few scenarios for Rangers and a few for Stargrave, and this is one of the weirder things that has happened, because up until relatively recently, I was a dyed-in-the-wool historicals man. I played Napoleonics, I played Colonials, I played World War II, bit of Zulu War, the Sudan, Sikh Wars, other stuff. And I'd played Warhammer as a youngster, but sort of fallen out of love with it in my early 20s, and then sort of played other things. And I was listening to a podcast about solo wargaming, and Joe McCullough was on it, and he was talking about how, well, he was talking about Rangers of Shadow Deep as it's a solo game, or you can play it as a solo. I mostly play it as a cooperative game, but be that as it may. And he sort of went, well, this is only really possible with fantasy or science fiction war games, because, solo wargaming is very much about story, and historical wargamers aren't really interested in that, and it's not really possible in historical wargames. And I became so annoyed by that. I wrote a 2-part column, something like nearly 6,000 words, about, Joe McCullough was a fat-headed idiot, and here are a bunch of historical war games, not like that I've written, and here are a bunch of other ones that other people have written, and this is nothing but baloney. But I thought, in fairness to the man, I should get one of his games to have, because I've been sort of vaguely aware of Frostgrave, but I went, okay, this game, Rangers of Shadow Deep, I'm going to pick it up and have a look at it. Because, you've got to judge the man on his things. And it turned out it was rather good. And I went, I could pick up a few figures too, And the other thing is, dyed-in-the-wool historicals and dyed-in-the-wool 1/72 man. I collected 20mm stuff because 28mm from the storage perspective was just awkward. And I picked up a few figures for Rangers, and I gave a game of Rangers a play. And one of my regular partners in crime, Savage, and I tried out Rangers, and we went, this isn't half bad. And then we played some more of it, and more 28mm figures kept arriving at my house, and more Rangers supplements kept arriving at my house. And here we are several years later, and I have, 3 Citadel cases full of giant spiders and gnolls and skeletons and other nonsense. And it's a tremendous game. I adore it. It's sort of hit that sweet spot of it's complex and there's enough complexity in it to keep you interested, but it plays quickly. I love the way the damage and to hit go together. I just think that's so elegant. I think it's so good. I think Joe's hit on a really clever way of putting together solo scenarios where none of the scenarios in themselves are particularly complex, but it's the fact that, okay, well, in this scenario, these special rules apply, but there's never that many of them. And they're really clever. I mean, I think it's a system I have stolen repeatedly for solo scenarios in miniature wargames. I've applied it to Black Ops by Guy Bowers, which is an absolutely fantastic modern skirmish game. Although I've used it mainly for World War II and Cold War. I've adapted it to the Men Who Would Be Kings, which is or at least the event phase. It had Men Who Would Be Kings as its own solo component, but I love it. I find I've enjoyed the setting. I've enjoyed the rules. I think there's and I apparently keep buying books by Joe McCullough because the chap is quality. He writes really good stuff, and even I even picked up that ridiculous 1,000 Mutations book because I just went, well, it's I don't play Frostgrave, but I have Frostgrave and I have a couple of the supplements mainly to rip off ideas for Rangers games. Because it's eminently, the ideas are eminently portable between the sort of the family of games. Like I've had, I stole some of the kids' toy dinosaurs and had a solo game of playing, dinosaur hunting on an alien planet in Stargrave, which did not end well. We ended up all my guys ended up inside a Tyrannosaurus, but yeah, it's just a really solid game, which I keep on telling myself, yeah, I'm just going to start to stretch it a little bit and turn it more into an RPG, and it's sort of there's enough there that if you're playing with other people, obviously less so if you're playing solo, that you can have that the RPG elements emerge. It's a bit like Necromunda in that respect. I don't know if have you played much Necromunda or
I've never actually played it, but I know it quite well as a concept.
But that idea of the small skirmish game where each game isn't particularly long, but a narrative emerges and people will put story on that, and that's the genius of Rangers, so far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, we've been playing it, my pal Robert and I. We've played a lot of scenarios, and it's that continuity of the characters. It's this is the guy who's always doing this. This is this person always fails their roles. You build up that good story so that when you sit down to do the next one, you're thinking, what's he going to get up to this time? So I love the storytelling aspect of it, and I'm really intrigued to try your one. I've actually got the scenario, is it Healing the Sick? Was that what it was called? To help the sick.
Yeah, to heal the sick.
So I actually have the miniatures that you talked about that were partly the inspiration behind it. I think it was the Wargames Foundry Plague Doctors. So I've actually got those guys. So I like we've not long played Blood Moon. I don't know if you've played Blood Moon before.
Yeah.
So it has
Great
again
scenario.
we've got this whodunit kind of angle as well, which I like. So literally unmasking the baddie at some point.
Yeah.
So like, what was your process for actually doing this? And how did you kind of go about? Like, was there a lot of playtesting involved to get to the stage where you thought, this is playable? Because one of my biggest fears to write a scenario is that the characters are either going to just steamroller all the baddies, or we're going to be dead in a turn, because I'm not experienced in that sort of thing at all. So
Well, I think to write a good scenario, you need to have a rigorous, well thought out, a profound understanding of the rules. All the figures have to be painted and ready, and a sort of a sort of monk-like sort of focus on engaging with the story and the mechanics of the game. And once you've worked out how to do that, you should tell me how. Because what I tend to do is just like I'll see something, and in this case, I'll focus on the particular here for a second, because it's always a chaotic, messy process. It's a bit like cooking without a recipe book, but you're sort of like, my wife is lethal for this. So she'll get a recipe book and it'll go 300, sort of 4 ounces of this, and she'll sort of pick up a scoop and go, about that, and it's very. So it's very much like that. So the analogy, actually the best analogy I can think of, it's a bit like throwing a pot. You get the wheel spinning and you have to start. And the first thing you do is you pick up your clay and you chuck it on the wheel, and the wheel starts spinning like Billy-O. And you can guide it where you want to go, but it's almost impossible to I have never in my life managed to get a scenario right first time. And I'm someone who, I probably write 5 to 6 scenarios a year, most of which are for the magazine, but some are for my friends or whatever. And you get better at it. And the trick that I find is start now and make the mistakes quickly. So if you think that something isn't going to work, try it and find out. And messing around solo has a huge part to do with this, sort of make those mistakes before you expose it to other people. But with To Heal the Sick, the inspiration for that was I saw those Foundry figures and I loved them so much. I just went, firstly, I have to buy these because I'm a deranged addict. And secondly, I have to have if I am going to buy these, I'm going to have a game in which I can use them. Mm-hmm. And what so I was sort of trying to think about, okay, well, and then obviously COVID leapt to mind. So I went, okay, plague doctors, there is a plague. And I've never managed to do this. And here's an example of an idea that didn't work. I wanted to have, and I think it's something that Rangers lacks, and I'm currently trying to write something that will manage this. Rangers lacks recurring villains. Mm-hmm. Every scenario that we've had, the bad guy appears, and the Rangers either lose and are wiped out, or kill the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And I think that it would be a really wonderful thing to have that. I didn't manage to do it to Heal the Sick, but what I wanted to do was have that whodunit thing that was in Blood Moon, which I think is one of the simplest but cleverest pieces of Wargames writing I've read in the last few years. It's really sharp. It builds narrative into the game. The game still works. It's there's no sort of hand waving. You don't have to. You don't need an umpire or a GM to sort of to add that. And in To Heal, so just for your listeners, if they haven't, if they're not familiar with To Heal the Sick, the idea for To Heal the Sick is the players know that there is a traitor in the Kingdom of Alador. There's a man who knows the information as to who the traitor is. He lives in this village. They have to get to the village and they have to find the guy, and he's going to give them the name of the traitor. They arrive. The village is deserted. There are crows everywhere, and there are sick people everywhere. So a plague has struck this village, and there are plague doctors moving around the village, sort of carting away bodies, trying to help sick people, and so on. And what is actually happening is that there are two baddies who are in the pay of the Shadow Deep, who have discovered that this information is leaked, and they're trying to find the contact and kill him before the players can find him. And the players have to explore the village, gather evidence to work out which of the plague doctors are actually the baddies, and then find the information that they need to find. So it's a race against time. The two things that sort of stood out to me about that scenario was, firstly, I stole the investigation mechanic whole cloth from Blood Moon. Okay, that is stolen lock, stock, and barrel from Blood Moon, because if it's simple and it works, why wouldn't you take it? You know, absolutely. You'd be a fool not to. But I wanted something. I wanted a sense of dread, because one of the joys of Rangers is, because it uses a D20, is that it's quite swingy. So you're either up or you're down. You're getting hammered, or you're laying waste all around you. There's very rarely a sort of, I think we might just swing this. It's very rarely in that sort of happy medium. And the number of games Savage and I have played where, we're going, it's 2 turns to go, we've got this in the bag, and then that 1 comes up or that 20 comes up, and it's, God,
the flies battering you.
Just pat, or what was that one in Burning Light? Just pass a bloody swimming roll, man. Just pass a bloody swimming roll. And, it's all hands to the pumps, and can we pull this off? And yay, we pulled it off. Hooray. And the sort of the mechanic that I wanted to heal the sick was that you have a sense of urgency, because every turn that you stay on the board, you're adding a number of skeletons or zombies to the outside of the board. And those guys, you don't have to fight those guys right now, but they're waiting. And there's more of them and more of them sort of closing in on you. Because at some point, you're going to unmask the bad guy, and then all these guys come on. Mm-hmm. And that's proved quite successful. The two major changes that I recall going to that game were, firstly, I put some wolves on the board at the beginning. That was a suggestion from Joe, because he had a look at it and went, there's nothing for the players there to do other than run around. Like, they can run around the board and gather clues, but there's nothing else going on while they're doing that. So we put in a couple of feral wolves who are obviously sort of harassing the poor plague-ridden villagers. And that actually, it sort of changed the tone of the game. And secondly, the undead in that particular game, because I called them undead because I wanted you to be able to use your ghouls, your zombies, your skeletons. It doesn't matter what figures you have, just so long as they're undead, you can use these guys. And what happened was that I had been using skeletons and zombies and ghouls and things, and they were too tough to have the numbers that I wanted, to have that feeling of being encroached upon. The players didn't have the combat power to knock them down. Mm-hmm. Because I think a zombie has like 10 hit points or something like that. And that's, an average character is probably going to have to hit him twice to put him down. And it meant that instead of being a sort of a desperate race against time, it was like a slog. So I changed the mechanics so that each undead only had 1 hit point, so that you only had to damage them once to put them down, but there would always be more to take their place. So it was sort of, killing the undead was not really the challenge. they were almost more of an environmental hazard than a sort of an enemy, because okay, yeah, any individual one of these guys is not a problem. It's the fact that there's maybe 3 or 4 of them coming at you. That's the problem. And there will always be more. So long as you remain on the board, once they've started coming onto the board, they're going to keep coming. So you need a plan to get to find the information and then get that information off the board. And that's the game. So yeah, it took a bit of play testing. Most of which was done solo, and then a couple of times with long-suffering friends of mine. But start. That's what I'd say. If you're interested in writing a scenario, work out what it is that you want to do with this. Why is this different from all the other ones? Because I can pick up any wargaming book written in the last 20 years, and there will be an attack defense scenario there. There will be a wagon train scenario, and maybe a bridge defense, or taking a bridge, or blowing up a bridge, or something like that. And if you want to do that, maybe you should try and work out some way, like, why is this one different? Why is your scenario worth pursuing rather than somebody else's? And then start. Because even, and it's I won't name any names, but I was talking to John Sutherland, who is also a regular contributor to Miniature Wargames, and we were talking about some material that we'd read, not just in Miniature Wargames, but also in other magazines, and we just sort of looked at went, he hasn't played that. There's no way he's played that, because I could tell just by looking at the board. I went, that's 8 turns. You've got to get this unit across the board. You can't do it. There's no, like, you learn if you write enough of these things that the stuff to look for. And it is a thing that and I've been doing this for 10 years now. It stands out to me that there is no substitute for putting the figures on the board and trying to game it out yourself. And spotting that stuff quickly. Like last month, I did a scenario for Xenos Rampant, the Dan Mersey sci-fi game. And I thought I had fixed I did a version of the old Rogue Trader Battle at the Farm scenario, and I thought I'd fixed it, because that was a scenario that I'd sort of struggled with as a youngster and could never really got it to where didn't know what was going wrong as a kid, and then just went, yeah, well, this is a scenario where the Marines are in a defended position and a smaller number of orcs are shambling towards them, getting riddled. And I went, okay, well, apparently it's early morning, there's early morning mist, so I'm going to effectively give the orcs cover in terms of mist. And that was what turned that game into, from a shooting gallery into, okay, well, maybe there's a tactical problem here. But to do that took me about an hour and a half, because I just kept setting the figures up and going, right, well, if I was the orcs, this is what I'd do. And how would the Marines react to that? So, and then just went, there is no way. The orc player just doesn't have options here. So yeah, the best time to start is now, and don't worry about messing it up, because you're going to mess it up. To just sort of accept that and try and get to those failures as quickly as possible. And you will get a sense of it. But yeah, that's it. And I'm acutely aware. Like I'm working on another piece for Rangers right now, and it is over a year. And because I don't have a deadline, I'm sort of tinkering with things and messing around in the edges of bits and going, yeah, I'm not sure if this works. And yeah, no, I'm at some point I'm just going to have to hold a gun to my own head and get it on the board. because I've gotten, out of 3 scenarios, I've got one play tested to an extent that I'm happy with it, and then the other 2 are just nonsense. They're words on a page. They're not a game.
Mm-hmm. How did it come about then that To Heal the Sick was included in the fanzine? Did Joe reach out to you about that, or like what was the story behind that?
No, I just wrote to him and said, "Listen, big fan, really enjoyed your work," and we just got to chatting because I'd written a scenario for Rangers. A friend of mine had given me some of these wonderful frog figures with blowpipes and things, and I'd written a scenario. I went, look at these delightful little fellas. I need a game for these guys. So I created a Rangers scenario for it. I sent it to him. He was like, "That's great, thank you very much," and just got to talking. And then he went, "Listen, we're putting this thing together. Would you be interested in doing something?" I went, "Sure, yeah, absolutely." No more sort of structured or mysterious than that, really.
Did you ever pull him up on the time he upset you back in the day?
Oh yeah. It's like, McCullough. But no, he's a decent skin.
Good stuff, Conrad. We're fast running out of time here, but we've talked about various things that you've been writing over the years. I just wanted to ask you've actually put one of these mystical book things together as well, I believe.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I actually just forgotten about that. I have a novel which is called The Foxwife's Tale. It is it's on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle for the cost of a cup of coffee. You can get it in hard copy for the price of 2 pints, and it's on Amazon. And it is a adventure story about about Japan in the 1850s, where this American chap goes to Japan and has adventures, and it's got chases and sword fights and mysteries and samurai and all the things that I like. And if your listeners fancy having a go at that, you will find it on Amazon and on the Kindle store. And I hope you enjoy it.